This video, Module 1, will be on the female reproductive system, and I will be using anatomical models. The female reproductive organs located within the body cavity make up the internal genitalia. The internal genitalia are located primarily within the pelvic cavity and consist of the ovaries and the ducts. The ovaries are the gonads and the site of oogenesis. They also produce estrogens and progesterones during the ovarian cycle. The ducts consist of the uterine tubes, also known as the oviducts or the fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. Reproductive organs visible from the outside make up the external genitalia. This video will also cover the accessory organs, the mammary glands. Let's begin with the external genitalia. They are known as the vulva. The vulva consists of the mons pubis, which is a pad of adipose tissue or fat anterior to the pubic bones. The mons pubis provides protection for the internal genitalia. The labia majora. This is a pair of large folds that are homologous to the scrotum in the male. Homologous means that they arise from the same fetal tissue. The skin of the labia majora usually has hair after puberty. Medial to the labia majora are two smaller folds called the labia minora. They remain hairless. Clitoris is erectile tissue and homologous to the penis in the male. An area called the vestibule will have several orifices. We'll look at those in just a minute. This is an illustration of the vulva. These structures are the labia majora. Medial to the structures, you have the smaller folds, the labia minora. The area within the labia minora is called the vestibule. It will contain the vaginal orifice and the urethral orifice. This structure is the prepuce of the clitoris. The prepuce is homologous to the prepuce in the male. The mons pubis is here. The perineum is a diamond-shaped area outlined in this illustration. The boundaries include the pubic symphysis anteriorly, seen in the pelvic girdle here, the ischial tuberosities laterally, located here on the pelvic girdle, and the coccyx, located here. Within the perineum are three orifices. Beginning with the posterior one, you have the anus, the vaginal orifice, and the urethral orifice. This is a model of the internal genitalia. The paired ovaries are located here. They are anchored to the uterus by the ovarian ligaments. The oviduct is this structure here. It is not physically attached to the ovary. The distal end of the oviduct contains finger-like projections that are ciliated. These finger-like projections help draw the secondary oocyte into the oviduct during ovulation. There are three regions in the oviduct. The infundibulum is the funnel-shaped region which has the fimbriae coming off of it. The ampulla, the usual site of fertilization, is this curved region. The last region is the narrow region called the isthmus. The uterus is shaped like an upside-down pear. In women that have never been pregnant, the uterus is about the size of a pear. The wall of the uterus will have three layers. The inner layer next to the lumen or the uterine cavity is the endometrium. It is this red area on the model. The endometrium will have two sublayers, a functional layer which is adjacent to the cavity. The functional layer is the layer that is shed during menstruation, and a deeper basal layer which helps generate the functional layer once it has been shed. The endometrium has receptors for the ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone. The middle thickest layer is the myometrium, which is smooth muscle and can be seen from here to there. The outer layer, this thin peach layer, is the perimetrium, and it is the parietal peritoneum. There are three regions in the uterus. The region that extends superiorly above the fallopian or uterine tubes is called the fundus. So it includes this region here. The body, the second region, makes up most of the uterus and is located here. The inferior section of the uterus is the cervix, this area here. The lumen that goes through the cervix is the cervical canal. The opening between the uterine cavity and the cervical canal is the internal os. And the opening between the cervical canal and the vagina is the external os. The area of the vagina that comes up and surrounds the inferiormost part of the cervix, these little spaces here, is called the fornix. The cervix resembles a donut. The vagina is this structure here. This is a model of the ovary. Recall that there are two regions in the ovary, an outer cortex, which contains follicles, and an inner medulla containing blood vessels. You will need to identify the different follicles within the cortex. The primordial follicles are seen here. The primary follicles are these two structures here. The blue cells are the cuboidal follicular cells, and in the center is a primary oocyte in yellow. You can see its nucleus here, this darker staining structure. The secondary oocyte is this structure here. It has a stratified layer of granulosa cells. They are still in blue. A primary oocyte with its nucleus, and the theca folliculi, seen as a raised area around the granulosa cells. This is a vesicular follicle undergoing ovulation. The secondary oocyte is located here. This darker region that just encircles it is the zona pellucida, and these cells here are the corona radiata. This is the antrum. After ovulation, this is what remains of the vesicular follicle. It becomes a corpus luteum, seen here, which is an endocrine structure that releases inhibins, progesterone, and estrogens. If pregnancy does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates and becomes a corpus albicans. This is a corpus albicans, so is that, and this as well. This is an older model of the internal genitalia, but what I like about this model is that you can see the broad ligament located here. The ovarian ligament is this structure, ovary, fimbriae with the infundibulum of the oviduct, ampulla of the oviduct, isthmus of the oviduct. Uterus. This is the fundus of the uterus. Remember, it's the section of the uterus or the region of the uterus that is superior to where the fallopian or uterine tubes empty into the uterus. The body and the cervix. Internal os, external os, cervical canal. Vagina with the fornix. These areas here that project upward from the vagina, and they surround the inferior part of the cervix. So when they do a pap smear, they come in and they scrape some of the mucosa cells here off of the cervix. This is a model looking at the uterus from a superior view. The fallopian or uterine tubes are located here. ovary, ovarian ligament, round ligament. The round ligament anchors the uterus to the labia majora. This structure here, it's the lighter structure, kind of the transparent structure, and seen here as well, will be the broad ligament. It drapes over the uterus like a tent. This region of the uterus is the fundus. It is superior to the uterine tubes. Remember, this is superior, this would be inferior, posterior, anterior. This is the body of the uterus. A sagittal view of the reproductive organs. The clitoris is seen here. Pubic bone, mons pubis, the round ligament, and they are paired. Each one continues to a labium majorum. Oviduct, this is the ampulla, the infundibulum, fimbriae, ovary, ovarian ligament. Uterus is located here. Anterior to the uterus is the urinary bladder with the urethra, and the opening here would be the urethral orifice. Posterior to the uterus is the rectum. The anal canal here, you can see the folds, and the opening is the anus. This section here is going to be the colon, specifically the sigmoid colon. The internal anal sphincter is visible here. You can see it here, and there, and the external anal sphincter here and there. Labium majorum and labium minorum. This section medial to the labia majora is the vestibule. Recall that it has the urethral orifice and the vaginal orifice. This is the vagina, the lumen of the vagina, and the fornix. Where the folds begin here in the mucosa, that begins the cervix of the uterus. So all of this is cervix, cervical canal, internal os, external os. This thin red area is in endometrium. Above my arrow to the blue is the myometrium, and the blue is the perimetrium. Some of the structures are more visible in this model. Urinary bladder. You can actually see the rugae, the folds in the urinary bladder, and the muscularis of the urinary bladder, the smooth muscle. Recall that's the detrusor muscle. The urethra, urogenital diaphragm. These make up the external urethral sphincter, clitoris, pubic bone, mons pubis, uterus. Endometrium of the wall of the uterus is this red area. Myometrium begins with the peach and continues on. Perimetrium is the blue. Recall it's parietal peritoneum that clings to the outer surface of the uterus. Sigmoid colon, rectum, anal canal, anus, internal anal sphincter, external anal sphincter. This space here, produced by the peritoneum, is the vesical uterine pouch. It is between the uterus and the urinary bladder. This space here is the rectal uterine pouch between the uterus and the rectum. The cervix is in this area. Again, notice the folds that begins the cervical canal. Internal os, external os. Fornix, seen here and there. The vaginal wall will consist of an inner mucosa, which is in peach, the muscularis layer, which is seen in red. The adventitia layer is not visible on the model. Let's move on to the mammary glands. In a lactating breast, and this is a breast that is producing milk, lobes are highly visible. This is a lobe, so it's the tan area. Another lobe, a lobe, and there are between 15 to 25 of these in each breast. In the sagittal view, you can see a lobe here and there. All of these are lobes. The size of the breast is dependent upon the amount of adipose or fat tissue, which is the yellow. There is some adipose also between the lobes, in addition to connective tissue. The connective tissue makes up the suspensory ligaments. They are seen in white here. They are attached anteriorly to the dermis of the skin and posteriorly to the fascia of the pectoralis muscle, which is this structure here. These are your ribs and the intercostal muscles. The lobes are divided up into smaller structures called lobules, and they are seen as these circles here. Within each lobule, you will have some sweat glands that have been modified, and they are called alveoli. They release milk. Milk is modified sweat. It contains proteins, fats, as well as lactose, which is milk sugar. Once the alveoli produce the milk, smooth muscle-like cells that surround the alveoli contract to move the milk into a duct system consisting of lactiferous ducts. They are seen here, these yellow structures. The lactiferous ducts will have swollen areas near the nipple called lactiferous sinuses. They can be seen here. Milk collects in the lactiferous sinuses. The ducts empty the milk to the outside at a raised area called the nipple. Surrounding the nipple is a pigmented area called the areola. It has enlarged sebaceous or oil glands. The oil from these glands helps keep the nipple moist, preventing it from cracking. This model shows the external structures of the mammary gland, the areola, and the nipple. Deep to the skin is the mammary gland. This is a model of the breast. You can see the areola and the nipple. The dark blue structures are the lactiferous ducts, the lactiferous sinuses, the pectoralis major muscle, and adipose tissue. This is a lactating breast. The purple structures are the lobes. Within the lobes are the smaller, round structures, the lobules. Suspensory ligaments are located between the lobes. Lactiferous sinuses, and the ducts leading to the nipple. Adipose tissue, pectoralis major muscle, pectoralis minor muscle. This concludes Module 1 for the female reproductive system.